To understand this story, you have to understand something about taxation in first century Palestine. Otherwise, we're liable to kind of project our own experience onto the text, right? And most of us don't like taxes, right? Most of us feel ambivalence when it comes to the CRA. I hear laughter of recognition. You know what I'm talking about, right? But we live in a democracy, so our government is of the people, by the people, for the people, right? And so it's our government, right? And so it's our government that's taxing us to do things that we want it to do, like keep our highways in good shape and provide schooling for our children and provide good medical care and provide fire protection and police services to keep us safe, right? And so this is what our taxes go for. Our taxes go for services that we benefit from, even though we feel ambivalent about it, right? This was not so in the ancient world, right? So in Israel, at the time of this story, Israel was occupied by the Roman Empire. And empires occupy nations and conquer nations in order to extract wealth from them. That's the whole purpose of empire, is to get rich on other people, at other people's expense. It's not to do it, work for their good, right? And so the Roman Empire is in control of Israel, and they have, in their brilliance, right, they locate people who are local citizens to become agents of the empire. And these local agents are tax collectors, right? They're from the town where they live, and they're called upon to then extract taxes from the people with Roman soldiers at their side doing it, right? So these local individuals are now in league with the oppressor, and they're seen as being traitors. And not only are they traitors, they're then exploiting the people. This money that's being extracted for them and coerced from them is then going to somebody else, and then they take a cut from what's happening. So they get rich in the process. So not only are they traitors, right, but they too are also exploiting the people just like the Roman Empire is exploiting the people. So people hate tax collectors, right? They're scoundrels. You can't think of anybody who is a worse sinner than a tax collector, and it's born out of anger, right? It's born out of this sense that these people are exploiting us. Like, I don't know if we have a comparable villain in our culture, or comparable scoundrels in our culture. I was trying to think, well, maybe like drug lords, who are making a lot of money off of people's suffering and exploiting people that way, factory owners who, are exploiting their workers and not providing safe working conditions and making children work for 16 hours a day, right? That doesn't happen in Canada because we have laws against that, but it does happen in other countries, and we benefit from that occasionally. But it's not quite the same, right? It's not there. So what you need to know is that this man, the character of this story, this is the situation that's going on. And so we have Jesus, who is traveling to Jerusalem. He's en route. He's been en route, traveling across from northern Israel down to Jerusalem, which is in the mid part of the country. And he's at Jericho, which is about a day or two's travel north of Jerusalem. And so he's there. He wants to stay in Jericho for the evening. He needs a place to stay. Anyway, he's coming into the town, and everybody is excited to see him. People have heard about him. They want to check him out. There's not a lot going on in first century Palestine, and so this is a big event, right? And so they're crowding around trying to see Jesus. And there's a man named Zacchaeus, who is the chief tax collector, who wants to see Jesus too. Now, you don't get the irony of this story if you don't know what Zacchaeus' name means. Zacchaeus, the name means innocent, clean, pure of heart. This man's name is pure of heart, and yet he's the chief tax collector. The word in the Greek is arche for chief. It's the arch tax collector. We know, that from study of ancient Rome, there was no such thing as a chief tax collector in the bureaucracy. It wasn't a thing. Luke is the only one who identifies it. And so, in a way, he's saying that not only was Zacchaeus a tax collector, He was the chief tax collector. He was the arch villain. He was the worst of the bunch, right, at tax collecting. He was exceptionally good at exploiting his own people. He was exceptionally good at taking wealth from them. And here he is called pure of heart. Pure of heart is exploiting us. This is a man that is lost to himself. And so he wants to see Jesus. Right? And he's trying, and the crowds inhibit him. Like, they keep him from seeing Jesus because the text says he was small in stature, which could mean that he was short, right? That he was physically short. It could mean that. It could also mean that he was small in the eyes of the people. They had a very low opinion of him. And so they weren't going to give him a pride of place. They weren't going to let him up in front. They were going to do everything they could to keep him out because they didn't want him there. And so he's trying to see Jesus. He's trying to get in. He can't quite get in. And so he recognizes, hey, he's going to pass by that sycamore tree halfway down the block or, whatever. And so he goes and climbs the sycamore tree knowing Jesus will pass by. Jesus, is aware of he's walking into town, he sees the crowd, there's lots of people clamoring for his attention, and he notices way off in that tree over there, there's a well-dressed man. There's obviously a rich man who just climbed a tree. Rich men don't usually climb trees. Rich men usually sit in front. They're given a pride of place, right? They're given honor within the community. So here's a rich man in this community who doesn't have pride of place. Here's a rich man in this community who's isolated. Oh, he's probably a tax collector. And Jesus apparently asked somebody, what's his name? Pure of heart. That's his name. So, crowd goes, Jesus as he's going by that place makes a beeline for the sycamore tree. And he could have done a lot of things at that moment, right? He could have said, pure of heart, Zacchaeus, why do your people hate you? What have you done that's alienated yourself to all these people? Where did you get the money to buy those fine clothes you're wearing, right? Why have you been exploiting people? Jesus could have said any of those things, and he doesn't. What he says is, Zacchaeus, come down. I must stay at your house today. I'm going to dine at your table, and I'm going to eat your food, and I'm going to sleep in that nice bed. And Zacchaeus is happy to receive it. And he climbs down, and they walk together to Zacchaeus' house. The crowd sees this, and the crowd begins to grumble. They start to question Jesus' judgment. They start to question his character. They start to question his moral integrity. What is he doing hanging out with that scoundrel? Why is he going to that man's house? Doesn't he know how that man has exploited us? Why is he going to Zacchaeus' house to eat at his table and spend the night? He should be shunning him. So now the crowd is wondering about Jesus. Who are you in league with, Jesus? What's wrong with you? It's kind of a gap in the story. We're kind of meant to assume that Jesus kind of goes to Zacchaeus' house and steps in and sees the fine carpets, the well-made furniture, the rare artifacts on the wall, all the best that money can buy in first century Palestine. It's all there. And again, you would think, Jesus could have done a number of things. He could have said, and where did you get the money for all this, Zacchaeus? I imagine Jesus doesn't. I says, wow, that is beautiful. And I imagine he eats the food and he says, that was good. And I imagine he sleeps in that comfortable bed in the guest room, and in the morning when Zacchaeus, says, "How did you sleep?" Jesus says, "I slept very well. That was a very comfortable bed. Thank you." Jesus, I doubt, showed any contempt for him or judgment of him while he stayed at his house. And yet something happened to Zacchaeus while Jesus was staying at his house. I imagine he saw his life as Jesus was looking at all his wealth and looking at all the stuff he had. He began to see his life from a different vantage point, from a different lens, and he began to see what he had done. And I think he heard the call towards being pure of heart. I think he heard the deep desire to be clean, to be liberated from the thing that bound him. And so there's this moment where, as he's standing there in the midst of all of his wealth, he says, "Look at my riches. I'm going to give half of it to the poor. I have been defrauding people. That's how I got wealthy. I have been defrauding people. I will now repay anyone I have defrauded 4 times as much." It's a radical transformation on the part of this individual, right? It's a profound change of heart where he says, "I want to be pure of heart. I want to be clean." And he repents, he turns, he changes his direction, he changes his behavior, he changes his way of thinking, and he gives it away. All this ill-gotten wealth, he gives it back. And Jesus says, "Today salvation has come to this house. I came not to seek, this is what I came for. I came to seek out and save the lost. For this man too was a child of Abraham. He too was a part of the covenant God makes with God's people. He too is part of the family. And today he's been transformed and redeemed," right? It's a familiar story, but it's a powerful story. I mean, it's what lies at the heart of this whole Christian faith enterprise that we're on, is that we believe that we're inspired by this. We believe in this, right? We're drawn towards it. There's something really compelling about it. So I was thinking, and for me, it's like, well, how do we then manifest this in our lives? Like, how do we live into this? Because part of this call is, in some ways, you too are pure of heart, right? And there are ways in which we too have been lost to ourselves. I was thinking about this in the context of what happened with the Heiltsig Nation earlier this week up in Bella Bella, right? There was an apology ceremony. There was a reconciliation ceremony. Reconciliation, right? That was supposed to happen, that didn't quite happen the way it was supposed to happen. A couple years ago, there's a Heiltsig artist, Maxwell Johnson, who was in Vancouver with his granddaughter to open a bank account, and they walked up to the teller of the bank and they showed their ID, and the bank teller immediately doubted their integrity. The bank teller immediately doubted that they were being honest and suspected them of fraud and kind of wouldn't, comply, and so called the Vancouver police, and the Vancouver police show up, and instead of checking out, hey, are you who you say you are? Like, is this a legitimate ID? Are you, and instead of assuming that they were people of integrity and character, they assumed that they weren't. They assumed that they were criminal and that something criminal was going on, and they treated them as such, and they put them in handcuffs, right? Imagine, step into their shoes. Imagine, we never have to deal with this. Most of us never have to deal with this. That you go to the bank, you've got your ID, you go to the teller, you just are treated with respect and dignity, and they don't question you. They don't doubt you. You're like, you want to open up an account? Sure. Okay, let's make that happen. I trust that you are who you say you are. I trust that you're a person of integrity. Let me treat you like that. right? We never have to doubt that. But that's what happened in this case. That was the harm that was done. Their dignity, their just humanity was disrespected at a really profound level. So we have ways, fortunately, in our culture, in our system of justice, of dealing with that. We have human rights codes. You can make a human rights complaint. There are systems that have. The Vancouver Police Board met. They determined that, yes, harm was done. There was a settlement that was made. The family was given a lump sum of money. There was $100,000 that was given to the Heiltsuk Nation, for working with their youth. And then there was this formal apology that was going to be made by the Vancouver Police Board and the Chief of Police, right? There was a whole system, according to our principles, that we would have rectified and reconciled this, right? And it's good that that worked. Like, great that, we're able to kind of institutionally, formally acknowledge that something has gone wrong here and we want to correct that. And so the Vancouver Police Board went up to Bella Bella, the Chief of Police went up to Bella Bella and made a very sincere apology that was not accepted. Because the two individuals who had done the harm, the two police officers, weren't present. Right? And the point, and that's where there's, I think, the disjunction between our sense of what it does it mean to, our sense of justice versus kind of the sense of justice on the part of the people. And what the Heiltsuk people were asking for is like, no, there is a breakdown of relationship. There was a real grandfather and a real granddaughter, and there were two men who were doing their job, who probably take pride in doing their job, who probably want to be good husbands and good fathers, who are probably good men in lots of ways. And something happened for these four individuals where harm was done. Right? And how do we heal that harm? How do we address that harm? One system of justice that tried to address it through money and, meetings of people who represent institutions and all those other things. And the First Nations folks are saying, well, okay, good. That's helpful in some way in terms of dealing with systems, but it's not helpful in terms of the real relationship between real human beings who have hurt each other. Right? And where there needs to be reconciliation, the real healing is for this grandfather and this granddaughter to be able to be face to face with these two men and for them to talk about it. And for one to say, I'm sorry, and for the other to hear it, and then for them to kind of patch it up and move forward and establish a new foundation for relationship. So the invitation was for those two men to come to their house. Like the grandfather and granddaughter is, come to our house and we will have a feast. We will have a ceremony. Come to our house and let us show you that we are people of integrity. Come to our house and let us show you that we do have character, that we are honest. Come to our house and let's dine together. And the invitation was for them to come and see that and be welcomed and say, I'm sorry, and talk about their own hurt or their own pain in relationship to this. And for us to move forward, right? And that didn't happen. And that's a tragedy, right? There was an opportunity for real restoration, for real healing. There was an opportunity to move beyond the history of, stereotyping and the history of, misjudging somebody's character and the history of tension between First Nations people and the police department. And good for the Vancouver police chief for being there, good for the police board being there, but the very people who caused the harm weren't there. And I don't know what it would be like to be those men, right? I don't know what it would be like to stand in their shoes. I think it would be very intimidating to get on a plane and fly up to Bella Bella, and you're surrounded by, you're in enemy territory, if you will. I don't know what it's like to feel like, oh no, I've already said I'm sorry. Like I wrote a letter, and I just want to leave this behind. I just want to let it be done with. We already gave you a ton of money. Stop. I don't know. And the problem is that ton of money didn't heal the pain. Money doesn't heal pain. Not in the way it needs to. What would have healed the wound is the restoration of right relationship and the respect people show to each other just out of integrity. So there's an opportunity lost, and now the pain is still there, and we have two Vancouver police who have to bear the weight of this unresolved situation too. Right? We are people of faith. We're people who believe that justice matters. Our Old Testament text says, is this profound statement of God saying, I don't want your festivals. I don't want your incense. I don't want your sacrifices. What I want is you to seek justice, to take care of orphans and widows. I want you to be in good relationship with people. I don't want you to exploit people. And the way we get there is through reconciling. The way we get there is through stepping into, like Zacchaeus does. He's able to say, yes, I have harmed people. And I want to move beyond that and be restored to being the man that I can be. That's what this whole thing is all about. That's why we're here. That's why we worship. That's why we do this thing, is so that we can be those kind of people in this world who bring about that kind of transformation. And it's a process. We do it imperfectly, right? But we're learning and growing as we travel along the way together. Amen.